Welcome back to math class. This is lesson 4.1, so that means we're in week 4 and this is lesson 1. We are going to continue working on adding and subtracting integers. Let's start by doing this warm-up. All right, I wanted to make sure that we were all on the same track for what our goals are for this first 6 weeks of school. So the goals for week 2 through 5. We've already gone through week 2, week 3. Today is the beginning of week 4. And we kind of prepared for this last week, but I can model subtraction by adding the opposite. So don't be intimidated when you see the P's and the Q's. Just remember, you could plug any number in that. So let's just say that, what if I said 1 minus 2? We could write that as 1 plus a negative 2. That's all it's saying. It's saying that any number P and any number Q that will work for. And you can pick your own numbers. Next week, we'll work on modeling the distance between two rational numbers using absolute value. And then in week 6, we're going to apply the skills that we learned through the first ones in real life problems. So that's where we will apply all of our skills that we've practiced so far this year. And we'll do some application problems, some real life problems, and then we'll take the test on that. So remember, I accept late work. You can turn in this work all the way up through the end of week 6 for any of these weeks, okay? The more practice you get, the better your grade is going to get, not just because you'll get more points, but because you'll get more confident with the skills. Okay, so let's start by recalling some of the things that we've already dealt with. On number lines, when you're adding, you move to the right. So you move to the right for positive, and you move to the left for negative. And I just wanted to remind us that subtracting a negative is the same thing as adding. So if I said 2 minus a negative 4, remember that could also, you can think about that means we're doing the opposite of negative 4. So what is the opposite of negative 4? Well, 2, the opposite of negative 4 is plus 4. So these two things mean the same thing. And you can practice that on a number line, okay? And then with the color counters, when adding, you want to simplify 0 pairs and count what remains. So let's just say, let's practice real quick with, let's say 4 minus 3. So that means I have 4 positive chips. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I have 3 negative chips. 1, 2, 3. And how I can solve that easily is I can see that this 0 pair goes away, this 0 pair goes away, this 0 pair goes away. And what I'm left with is a single positive chip. So I know that 4 minus 3 equals 1. And then absolute value, what I want you to remember from that, absolute value is the distance from 0, and it is always positive. So let's match the key terms from what we've learned so far. Okay, we're going to practice, and we touched on it last week, but we're going to practice writing subtraction by adding the opposite. I got the most confusion last week over putting it together, number 4, because we were asked to do that. And I see that I wasn't very clear with my directions. So when I write subtraction by adding the opposite, it's that same thing as when I said rewrite these as addition. And a few things I need to make clear. That when we do this, we cannot change the value of the statement, okay? So let's think about that as we go through this. But first, let's say I want us to think about the additive inverse. So it's the opposite of the given number, and when you combine it with that number, it results in 0. So that's vocabulary from last week. We know what that is. You can rewrite subtraction problems using that additive inverse or opposite. So what is the additive inverse of 3? Well, what is the opposite? Same distance on a number line in the opposite direction. That's -3. What is the additive inverse of of -3? Well, that's the +3. So we're going to rewrite the following subtraction problems as addition problems. So I'm going to keep my 12, but I want to change this subtraction to adding the inverse, okay? So now I'm going to change my subtraction to adding, and the inverse of 3, which is what's right here, the inverse of this is -3, the opposite. Okay, so again, I'm going to change subtraction on this one. So I start with my -12, and I'm going to change to a plus, but I'm going to write the inverse of 3. It's a -3. On this one, again, I start with my first number, 12. I change that to a plus, and I want to write the inverse of -3. That's +3. Remember, that's a situation where we're minusing a negative, so we're going to do that opposite. That's a 3. And then finally, I'm going to do it again for this one. I start with my -12. I'm going to change that minus to a plus, and I'm going to do the inverse of -3, which is just +3. And that's another situation where it's minus a minus, and so it turns to positive, which kind of intuitively doesn't make sense, but when we think about it, we've practiced that a little bit on a number line, and now we're using the additive inverse, but it does the same thing. All right, now you try. I want you to rewrite these as addition. And remember, it can't change the value. Let's go back. It can't change the value. So when I look at this first one, when I do 12, let's try a different color here. When I do 12 minus 3, well, that's 9, right? And when I do 12 plus a -3, that's also 9. So check, it didn't change the value. So if you do the two problems and they don't give you the same thing, then you know you've made a mistake somewhere. Okay, so remember, you can't change the value. So I'm going to change this to positive. So I've got my 10 plus the inverse of 9. So notice on this one, we changed the sign, and then the inverse of -4 was +4. So that's another example of seeing minus a minus turning into a plus. All right. So we've used number lines, and we've used number lines, we've used color counters, but some people like to think of things as just as in rules. So when combining numbers, you can think of these to kind of help you. So remember that you can always visualize the problem using number lines and color counters, but this might help some of you as well. Okay, so for this strategy, 1, you're going to rewrite the problem as addition, just like we practiced doing. And then I want you to consider the signs. So be thinking about, is it positive or is it negative? Okay. If the two numbers you're combining have the same sign, then you will add them and keep that sign. Or think of just, you're always going to keep the sign of the bigger one, but if they're the same, it doesn't matter. Okay? If the two numbers you're combining have opposite signs, so one's positive and one's negative, then you're going to subtract them and keep the sign of the bigger number. Okay? So if they've got the same signs, so that means they're both positive or they're both negative. Just add them together and keep that sign. If you're combining numbers that have opposite signs, subtract them and keep the sign of the bigger number. You know what? We might just think about it as saying, that you're always going to just keep the sign of the bigger number, because if they're both the same sign, the bigger number has that. So the big thing is, if you same sign, you add, opposite signs, subtract, and then you're going to keep that sign of the bigger number. So let's practice this for a minute. Let's investigate. So let's look at 10 minus 12. So we're going to rewrite that as addition. So that's what we did. We took the minus, made it a plus, and then we took the positive 12 and used the inverse. And then we're going to consider the signs. Well, the 10 is positive and the 12 is negative. So I know I've got different signs. I'm going to subtract, and I'm keeping the sign of the bigger one, which is 12. 12 is negative, so I know it's going to be a negative. Okay, now I just subtract 12 minus 10 equals 2. The negative 12 is bigger than in the original problem, so I keep that sign. My answer is -2. Sounds good. And if I did that, I could do that other ways. If I wanted to do it using color counters, I'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 negatives, and I'd have 10 positives. So I'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 positives. I would get rid of my 0 pairs and see what's left over. Well, there's 2 negatives. I could have also done it on a number line, where I start at 10, and I know that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There we go. Where I'd start at 10, and I would count backwards 12 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And that would land me at -2. So if you see, all of these strategies work to do the same thing. now you try. We're going to use that latest strategy where if we have the same signs, we will add. If we have different signs or opposite signs, we will subtract. And then we're always going to keep in our answer the sign of the bigger one, of the bigger number in the original problem. Oh wait, I made a mistake there. Let's look at this again. So these ones, they have the same sign. So I'm going to add them together. Oh. I'm going to keep the sign. These have the same signs, so I'll just add them together and I'll keep the sign. So looking ahead today, it's Monday and Tuesday. You are going to watch the lesson that we just did, which you've already done. You are going to complete all the parts of it, and then you are going to use your extra time to correct any missing choice board activities from the prior weeks, or go ahead and begin choice board 4. Remember, choice boards cover the entire week. They're due on Friday. I do accept late submissions, but I grade on Fridays. Try to post them on my weekend. Anything turned in past the end of school on Friday will be graded later as I get to it. And I will record it no later than, you guys might see me, some of you might not be familiar with this, but NLT, if you ever see it, it means no later than. Okay, no later than next Friday. On Wednesday, you'll complete the module activities. Everyone does that at home. And I have my office hours. On Thursday and Friday, you will complete the module activities that's listed under that day. So, just want to remind you that math skills are life skills. You got skills, I got skills.